Morning, everybody. Yes, so it may seem to many people that the RSPB is obsessed with bittern, and we probably are guilty of that. So the idea behind Lakenheath was really to try and create new wetland habitat, particularly reed bed, because bitterns were in a perilous state in the mid-1990s, and hopefully to say something about where we've got to. So, in 1995, we purchased 246 hectares of arable and relic poplar wood, and we've added to the site since then. As I say, the site, the initial purchase was a mixture of arable farmland growing carrots and the poplar plantations that were left over from Bryant and May's more extensive poplar wood. After that, in 1997, we purchased a small section of Triple SI, which we call Botany Bay, and Natural England called Stallow Wash, at the western end of the site. That's a mixture of reed bed and sedge fen, and I guess is a relic of the original fen. So, as you do when you buy farmland and revert it back to a wetland, there was a large amount of work in land forming, reprofiling ditches, creating pools, bunds, etc. All the necessary planning permissions, Environment Agency permissions, and we're actually classified as a reservoir. So, because we're holding more than 20, I know it's funny, isn't it? Because we're holding more than 25,000 cubic meters of water above ground level, we're subject to the Reservoirs Act. And we obviously did quite a lot of reed planting, but I'll say something more about the flora and fauna of the site in a bit. So this gives you an idea of the site. You've got the Little Ouse on the left. You've got the Triple SI at the bottom. You've got the Ely to Norwich railway line running up the right-hand side. So this is the western end of the site, looking eastwards, and you can. This was taken in 2004. So you can see the developing reed bed, and you know, some of the works that we've had to do. So you can see some of the internal bunding. You can see this is the IDB drain here, which we moved so that we could improve the hydrology within the site. And we have, I could talk for 10 minutes about the hydrology, which I won't do. We also have this key water structure here, what we call the interceptor drain, because the water, all the wet habitats are on the left-hand side, on the north, nearest the river. We get seepage through the riverbank, and there's a hydrological gradient through the site. The water ends up in the interceptor drain, and we recirculate it. We couldn't bund ourselves off. We couldn't seal ourselves off from the neighbouring farmland. So we have a recirculation system. So the geology is peat overlying sand overlying chalk. We couldn't seal ourselves off. So colonisation. As the previous speaker was saying, that was really interesting from your ghost ponds point of view. It's been mostly natural. I have there's a report that my predecessor did where we looked at the flora that came back as we started restoring the wetland, and we got something in the order of about 100 species back, primarily from buried seed or fragments in the ditches. So there was seed in the peat, and as we turned that over and land formed, plants germinated. There was the slubbings from the arable ditches, and again we've got plants back from that. We did plant something like 300,000 reed seedlings, which were grown on site, and staff and volunteers did a lot of work in the early years as the cells were created and then planted up. But basically the rest of the flora has come back from the seed bank or fragments in the ditches. We've done a couple of introductions or reintroductions. So we tried to reintroduce fen ragwort, which hasn't worked, and we're currently undertaking a project to reintroduce marsh pea to the Triple SI at the western end of the site. So what are we missing? Well, there's quite a few species that we're missing. This is one of them, frogbit. So again, in this document, my predecessor outlined some of the plants that we don't have. And we know that water germander used to occur within the SSI and is indeed one of the notification features of the site. That's been lost. We're in the process of trying to reintroduce marsh pea following changes to the management in the SSI. But things like water parsnip are absent that were recorded in the 60s and 70s. And then you go further back and there were things like frogbit, fen orchid, flowering rush, sundew, and I suspect a lot of those, the chemistry has changed so significantly that we will never see those species back on the site. So, key species for us, obviously bitten at the top of the list. The classic kind of reed bed species, marsh harrier, bearded tit, otter, water vole, the suite of more common reed bed birds, and invertebrates. I'm going to say a little bit about some of those. And then for us, the icing on the cake, we obviously designed the site with bittens and reed beds in mind. And then serendipitously, cranes have turned up, and they're probably our most charismatic bird now. So bitten. I think we had the first bitten was recorded on the site in 2002, and this shows the breeding data over the last 10 years, really. The peak we've had has been 7 booming males, 7 nesting females, and we seem to have stabilized at about 4 nesting females and 5 boomers in the last few years. Similar story for marsh harrier. The RSPB, we have targets in our management plans as to how many nesting marsh harriers we aim to the site to produce, etc. And the target was 10, so we've exceeded that, and indeed 2 years ago we had 22 nests on the site, and we've been churning out marsh harrier chicks in good numbers now. So bearded tits, first bred on the reserve in 2004. We've had up to 100 nesting pairs, and I think it was when they recolonized Lakenheath, it was the first breeding record in West Suffolk for 104 years, according to the bird report that we produce as well. So I can't give you exact figures for otter, but they're being seen more frequently on the reserve. We've certainly seen this year. We've seen a family of 3 otters on the site at regular sightings, and we have a good population of water voles across the reserve. For more common reed bed species, I think these numbers kind of really speak for themselves. So. In the arable ditches where we had little reed fringes, we did a common bird census. Once we purchased the site, and before we'd done significant reversion work, and there were 24 pairs of reed warbler, sedge warbler, and reed bunting put together. And then before the cranes started nesting on the site, and it made it difficult for us to do CBC across the whole reserve, we had something like 1,100 pairs of those species, 800 pairs of reed warblers alone. And, things like knock-on effects, like we get really good numbers of cuckoo in the late spring, obviously parasitizing the reed warblers. So I'm not just going to talk about birds. I'm sure lots of people can see the marsh carpet moth larvae. So we've got some good invertebrates on the site. Some of these have clearly moved out from the SSI onto the created land. We have common meadow, the food plant of the marsh carpet moth, occurring on a number of locations across the recreated land, and yellow loose-striped bee, Macropus europaea. We've had that around the visitor centre in the last couple of years, as well as elsewhere on the recreated land. So a good suite of invertebrates, and I think it's really useful that we have the relic fen right next door so that we can get some movement out from the triple SI. And we have a really good set of reed bed specialist moths, for instance. And then the cranes. So these are, I guess, the jewel in the crown for us. We had 2 pairs arrive out of the blue. We hadn't done any design work for cranes. We weren't anticipating them, and two pairs decided to nest on the reserve in 2007. We successfully fledged a chick in 2009, and we've reared 8, or our crane parents have reared 8 chicks to date, with this last year being the best year ever, with a set of twins and a singleton from the other pair. And this is the family of 4 from last year. So where are we now? Well, the oldest cells are nearly 15 years old, and we're starting to do more significant reed bed management. We've had some interesting species which we hope will come and breed. Some of them already are. So great white egret, we had a little bitten last year calling. We've recorded wasp spider. Willow emerald was a first record for this year. Scarce chaser. So I wanted to be completely honest and open. We have lost some things. So golden oriole we've lost, and the fen ragwort reintroduction hasn't worked. Don't really know why the fen ragwort didn't work. Golden oriole seems to be declining in northwest Europe, and despite us planting another 20 hectares of poplar wood, the orioles haven't really responded to that. So I was talking about where we go from here in terms of management. So the oldest reed bed cells are over 15 years old now. So we're going through a process of rejuvenating them. We don't want to go back to where we were in the mid 1990s, where reed beds tended to be old and senescent and scrubbed up. So that those species like bitterns, which like the early phase of a developing reed bed, are disadvantaged. So we're starting to cut areas of reed on quite a large scale. I'd love to be able to turn this into biofuel, but we're not quite there yet. We have a project, a national project with a number of other partners and the Department of Energy and Climate Change, looking at turning this into something that we can burn in a boiler. But at the moment, we're just having to set fire to it. So you can see there's an excavator cutting it in the background, and staff and volunteers are burning up. So we're going through a process. We'll cut it, dry it out, graze it with livestock, so knock the reed's vigor back over a period of 2 or 3 years, and then reflood it. And actually, one of our crane pairs nested in one of these rejuvenated areas last year, the pair that reared the twins. So where would we like to go? Well, we'd love to double the size of the reserve. Kind of Lawton principles, bigger is better. We'd love to be 700-800 hectares rather than the 390 that we are at the moment. There's a whole bunch of things that we'd like to do to our woodland, given that we've lost the orioles. We have an opportunity to make the hybrid poplar woods much more interesting, getting some more native species in, some big tree willows, some alders, and try and get some more interesting wet woodland habitat, which wouldn't disadvantage a recolonization of the site by golden orioles in the future, because that's the sort of habitat I gather they're using in further south in Europe. And there's a whole bunch of species on the cusp of nesting in the UK, or already nesting in the UK, like a great white egret, little bittern, night heron, purple heron, and we'd love to have some of that action at Lakenheath. So we're thinking about how we manage the site, over the next 5 to 10 years, to try and attract some of these species in to colonize and start breeding. I mean, great white egret and little bittern are already nesting in Somerset. We currently have 3 great whites knocking around on the reserve, as they did last year. So we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed. And I just wanted to finish up with a nice view. So, yes, thank you.